Good evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and we are here to talk about accepting and balancing our emotions. We all have emotions and we all use them, but we could use them, even the negative ones, help us get to our better self and to help us grow. Having said this, I have a new friend, Leslie Baker, here. And of course, you know Dr. Michelle Peticolas, and I hope I'm saying your last name right. And of course, Jeanne is here to get me through this. Having said that, Jeanne, can you please take over so I can do what I need to do?
Sure. I found two quotes that I wanted to kind of kick us off with. And yes, we are talking about emotions. And one thing that I can say is we are walking receptacles of emotion, and we need to accept that. So one quote comes from an author, Kilroy Oldster, from the Dead Toad Scrolls. He says, engaging in meditative self-reflection and gaining increased control of inner experiences provides a person with a sense of control over fear and trembling and the chaos of life. I love that, the chaos of life part. And Carlos Wallace, who wrote The Other 99 Times, Train Your Mind to Enjoy Serenity, wrote, you own your feelings, you own your thoughts, you control both. No one has the right to any of it, to any of you, without your permission. And I thought I would share those to kind of get us kicked off. And as you said, Carla, you know, owning emotions and balancing and accepting emotions is important, especially as we try to round out ourselves. And as we were talking, planning the show, I remember sharing with you in drawing, when you draw just a circle on a paper, it's just that, it's a circle. But when you start to add the shading, the dark side of it, you start to shade it around and add that dimension, it becomes a sphere. So one of the things that I hope we touch on is how to integrate all of our emotions so that we can become the person 360 that we are. And who better to talk about these than a transformation coach as Dr. Michelle is, and a therapist who's an expert in play therapy, who Leslie is. So let me kick this off to Michelle, and then we'll go to Leslie and see how things are unfolding for accepting and balancing emotion.
Thank you, Jeanne. I'm Dr. Michelle Peticolas, founder of Secrets of Life and Death and Second Chance Secrets. And for about 15 years, I work with people around grief and loss. So I know something about emotions and what happens when things come apart in our lives or when we experience trauma. And emotions are a biological factor in human beings' lives. It's part of our system. It's part of the way in which we identify when things are not going right. It can get out of whack when we repress our emotions, when we don't allow them to be released, because emotions are actually energy that need to be released out of the body. But of course, you want to do that in appropriate times. You don't want to be releasing it in the middle of a work schedule or in the middle of a football field. Well, maybe you could do it in the middle of a football field. But you want to find ways to do that. And when I worked with my clients, I gave them a regime where they would spend specific time every day allowing their feelings to release. And it's amazing. I had one client who had been grieving the loss of her husband for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And within the first month, that went away because I gave her permission to grieve, to allow those emotions out. And the interesting thing is that when you allow the emotions to release, which is just energy, it will actually release in 2 minutes or less if you don't allow your mind and your thoughts to jump in and stimulate it. Back to you, Jeanne.
Is there is there a way to release it in 2 minutes?
Yes.
Like do you go, okay, I'm releasing this emotion, poof?
Well, when I work with my clients, I help them to find out where they're holding it, because if you're in the habit of holding it, you may not even be aware. A lot of people, they numb their bodies so that they don't have to feel the emotions. And they literally use muscular energy to hold that emotion in. So I take them in a body scan and help them to identify where the blocks are in their body. And sometimes it takes a number of sessions before they even start to have that conscious awareness. Now, we all have that ability to be aware of what's going on in our bodies. That's part of our brain circuitry. But if you have turned that off for years, you actually have to reactivate it. And sometimes you have to reactivate it by helping people get in touch with the physical sensations in their body first.
Okay. That makes sense. And the reason I had asked is sometimes we say things and it seems so simple, but the action isn't quite as simple. And the idea that we might be numb to some of the emotions we hold is, I think, I'm not sure which word I want to pick. I think it's kind of, it's awesome to be able to recognize that and to say it out loud. Because I've done a lot of work with it, but I remember, several times walking out of a session with somebody and going, I'm not sure I get that. I'm not sure that's what I need, So, but I also know that many times the right thing seems so simple that I want to overlook it, but doing a visualization mind scan of where you might find that ball of energy it sounds like a practice that we need to be doing. Do we call you Dr. Baker?
No,
No,
just Leslie Baker. Yeah,
okay.
I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, registered play therapist supervisor, and a couples therapist. Yes.
Yeah, I love that you do play therapy, and it's one of the reasons I suggested to Carla that we reach out, because as therapy goes, if we could make it, something that we can take into the world, and play is something we need to take into the world, it's very useful. And I think that goes with what Dr. Michelle just had talked about, just recognizing where we're holding emotion. I know you work with some kids actually who've been very much traumatized. And how do you help kids balance emotions and accept emotions?
Well, one of the things that that we do is we take we concretize, and a lot of our youth don't use words. So I work with littles and bigs, children and adolescents. And so the body scan that an adult can do visually or in a manner of imagination, some of our youth might do it by drawing a picture of their body and coloring, using different colors on the body scan that we've created, and color different colors for whatever they choose, for sadness, anger, and they'll draw it on the body, on a picture of a body, or we lie them down and trace it, and they'll color in the spots. And that may be the beginning of emotional awareness and where it is in their body. And they may even draw or create something that represents that emotion. So an example might be, if I'm having tummy trouble, they may create a visual of a little bug or a little creature that represents that emotion. So for us, it's awareness, just like with the doctor. And then we move it outside of the body so that they can look at it, have a conversation with it, and be able to have a relationship. Because sometimes with youth, if it's so inside, it feels so overwhelming. They can't, they have a difficult time having a relationship with it. And when it's outside of the body, they can take that energy. And then we do a lot of movement. We may imply music or movement or any kind of thing. So with an emotion, maybe anger, some of our youth turn it in and turn it towards themselves, like with inappropriate behaviors. They might hurt themselves, eat too much, not want to move. And we try to move that energy out. So we might get up and push it out or sing it out or find ways that are active to move that energy or those emotions in a different way. So those are the ways that we move it from the scan to an actual action. Some of my youth create music. We might do drumming. And remember, all of those things can help youth and adults for that matter. You know, you think of yoga, you think of meditation. Some of those will integrate verbalizations and movement so that we as adults can also get it out.
That's actually, I think both of you have given some great tips that we should all consider, because one of the things I know is that many of us have grown up and learned not to recognize emotion or to be fearful of emotion. I was told I was not allowed to cry, and it usually comes in the form of, I'll give you something to cry about, or, those, what I like to call dadisms. My father was, it took me years to realize that my father's language of love was to push and cajole. And so as a kid, I took it as if he was mad at me. So things like, I'll give you something to cry about, were just awful to hear. And so I got into my teenage years and my young adult years, and I didn't cry. You could put me in the saddest movie in the world, and I would see everybody blubbering, and I would not cry. And so giving myself permission to cry was a difficult place to get to. But I think we don't honor or respect our emotions enough, because I think we need them. We need to be angry. We need to be fearful, because those give us signals, but we need to keep them in a perspective so we're not consumed by it. And that's where balancing comes in. Is there any magic to how to balance the positive and negative emotions so that we become whole people?
I think that in my perspective, there's a theory that people don't need to get into, but it's Gestalt. And it's thinking that the whole is important. So you can have your light and your dark pieces together. And as a whole human, you want to include all of your emotions. And we try not to categorize good and bad emotions, but rather that we are all of those things. So in that practice, you be above my head, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a quilt, and it has a lot of light and dark pieces. And if you can think of your emotions that way, there's a purpose, and we want to experience all of them. And that helps to balance the quilt, if you will. It's too much sometimes to have an all dark quilt or an all light quilt. So in the process of learning about yourself, you want to make room for all of those. Like you were saying, Jeanne, one time I was walking out of my office, and it was a difficult area that I was practicing in. And I was telling a friend who was a military veteran that I was putting my keys and becoming a little like this every time I went down to my car. And he told me, "Good for you." And I was kind of surprised. I really wanted to walk to my car relaxed and be happy. And he said, no. You need to use that nervousness. You need to use that hypervigilance in order to protect yourself, because there was some sketchiness and such in the neighborhood. And he said, by channeling the nervousness and channeling the hypervigilance, you'll stay safe. To ignore it and to squish it is to not stay safe. I learned that day that by embracing all of me, even the nervous, even the hypervigilance, that it could keep me safe instead of ignoring it. So that's just an example of how you want to learn about all your emotions and you want to use them when appropriate.
So is there do we kind of get ourselves out of balance when we spend all of our time working and kind of getting all stressed out with work, and then we come home and we're doing something else? And I mean, we are a society of doers. You know, we like to be busy little bees because something along the lines told us that. I can recall actually, I have an older sister, and she was going through a pretty traumatic time. And so I said to her, you know, can I lead you in a meditation to help you manage the stress? And her response was, meditation is the devil's workshop. And I kind of looked at her with a quizzical face, because, you know, we went to the same churches growing up. So I was like, where'd you get that? And it was an interesting thing because I found that words were important. So I was like, okay, we won't do meditation. How about if I did a visualization to protect you? You know, which basically the way I was thinking of visualization was meditation with a little bit of illustration in there. And she was like, okay with that. But we were so, I walked away thinking, you know, we're so much about doing things and showing things and having things that we don't always let the silence come. So I often say we're busy being human doings, not human beings. Is that because we don't know how to manage or process emotions, and being silent might scare us, which is also an emotion?
Well, actually, it was not safe when we were children to experience those emotions. We learned our behaviors around emotions when we were children, and we had to learn things that were going to enable us to survive. And so those emotions are actually scary, and the doing thing, partly it's habit, but partly it is part of our process of coping so that we don't have to experience our emotions. Because and I totally get what was it your sister was saying, because when you stop, then your thoughts happen. And we stay busy to stop the thoughts, because the thoughts are what will bring up all the stuff that we never dealt with, that was never healed. So when you talk about balance, it's not oftentimes for many of us, it's a balance that's a lifetime of imbalance that we have to take a look at and work with before we can get to the day-to-day balance. And oftentimes the day-to-day imbalance where we're having difficulty is rooted in childhood habits and fears and emotions that we never dealt with.
Huh.
So it's kind of like you can't just sort of isolate it and say, okay, we need to be more balanced right now. Allow your emotions. If you've had a habit of holding down your emotions, in fact, in my childhood, I didn't have a particularly stressful childhood, but when you look at attachment theory, I was not attached to my mother. So that has a huge impact. And I learned to go up into my head. I loved my brain. I had such great ideas and thoughts, and they were very, intellectual kinds of thoughts. And that was my escape. And I had no awareness. I had to literally be drawn back into my body through massage and through touching in order to get into my body, because I was hanging out here. And later I joined a spiritual community, and then I hung up out here in the ether. So it takes reintegrating into your sensory experiences. That's the work I do with my clients, is I help them to get back into their bodies, because I understand what it's like to shut down. I remember somebody would say something to me that was an insult or hurt me, and I wouldn't even know until 2 days later because they wouldn't get in.
And then 2 days later, you're like, I'm angry.
Yes.
I've been there. I've been there. It's like, I'm really angry at how that happened. But then the ability to process it with that person is gone. It's a fleeting moment.
Well, you can still process it, but you need to know how to process it. And you just have to understand that workaholism is just one of the many isms that we use to avoid our feelings. There's alcoholism, and there's food binging and computer games, and there's drugs. Do you know that 1 out of 7 adult Americans are on some kind of psychiatric drug, primarily tranquilizers and antidepressants? And that doesn't account for all the rest of us who are self-medicating through overworking or overeating or overwatching TV or over texting or over Facebook.
Isn't it true that Americans, we go big at everything?
We do.
We can't just touch on it. We have to jump into it. I think one of the reasons that this subject is of interest, at least to me, possibly to Carla, is because we've been talking a lot about changing your mindset, being aware of the inner, well, I call it the inner committee, the thoughts that we have going. And we even touched on Deepak Chopra and his quantum theory with the speed of thoughts and the speed of bosons and quarks. And all of this can be overwhelming when you start to walk around and think about where do you fit in this world. And we do have a tendency, at least I think we do, to be left brain logical and continually, be doing something to move something forward. I mean, we all have our project lists. Unfortunately, it's probably 10 projects instead of 2. So we're always moving on and doing different things. But one of the things that came up is as we change that mindset and we take a step out, people around us tend to pull us back. And it's not that they're doing anything, negative. It's that there's a comfort zone. And you're changing that comfort zone by trying to change yourself. And people around you who are in the comfort zone are going like, oh, no, come back. It's safer to stay here. And I did experience that when I was learning about alcoholism. I was married to an alcoholic. And when we started to go through the process of, let's say, releasing that ism, everybody around me was getting angry, and they were getting angry because I was actually stating out loud what I needed. I need you to, whatever, I need you to understand, or I need you to do this, or if I'm going to be successful with this process, I need a little help. And they kept pulling me back. And I remember having to say to my mother, which was probably the hardest thing in the world. I picked up my little baby and all of our stuff, and I packed the car, and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Mom, it's not safe for me to be in this house right now. I need to leave." And she was hurt, but I found that my family was telling me I had to do things the way that would be detrimental to the progress. And that was very difficult. So along the same way, what we were talking about is how when we start to change our mindset, there are voices in our head that want to pull us back. And the emotions are one of them. And the biggest one being fear, which, I think fear is a good one for safety reasons, as you mentioned, Leslie. But I think we fear. And so when we start to feel fearful, we're like, okay, I can't do that. I can't do that.
Jeanne, I just want to go. Fear is an emotion that gets you to take action because it's really uncomfortable. So it's part of our survival system. It's meant to make you really unhappy and want to do something. So of course we are afraid of fear because fear is uncomfortable. Okay, over to you, Leslie. Sorry.
Not at all. I was thinking a little bit differently about emotions and how, in family systems theory, we talk a little bit about the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So there you are trying, to change your mindset, and that's a part of the system that's trying to assert itself. And then what you're describing, Jeanne, is that then whether it's in our own head or in a family system, people like homeostasis. They like to come back to the regular comfort zone, as you were talking about it. And even in our own minds, stepping outside of that to make a change, a lot of even our own voices in our head will pull us back to the regular homeostasis. That's the baseline. And when I work with families, right, they come in, they say they want to change, but they start to do that, and at least 4 of the members will say, no, don't change, because that's comfort. And so how we work with that is you have to, even in your own mindset, address, rather than calling it resistance, I like to call it reluctance. What is our reluctance to doing something new, to looking at the fear, to addressing, instead of walking, to go outside and walk for 15 minutes. I love us. We're either all or noneers, right? We either want to meditate every day for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or we don't want to meditate at all. So in a lot of my cases, I work with, it's okay to meditate for 5. And maybe you do it 3 times a week just to start. So doing little things in the middle can help you build a new habit. You don't have to already be there, and you don't have to not do it at all. Just little increments of change will trump that reluctance. What are you willing to do? I don't know about you, but nobody wants to be told, open up all your emotions, get them out, come on, especially if we've never done it before. Just do a little. What is your mind and your body willing to do? Well, I think I could wake up in the morning and do circle faces. A lot of my kids will just make a circle and then make whatever face they're feeling. That's all they can do. Yay!
Leslie, I love your techniques with children. They're so great.
And there's a lot of apps that will do emotions, right? So some of my kids that are app happy, we just pick an app and they pick a feeling, and we just do that 3 times a day. But whatever it is, whether it's low tech, no tech, looking in the mirror and just drawing with lipstick on the mirror where your emotion is, in a happy face, sad face, straight face, I have no emotion today. Those are just little tricks, and we start small.
I love it.
And then we work our way up.
Carla, you had something?
Yeah, now we're saying kids, but this isn't only for kids. It could be for anyone.
Oh, anyone.
Anyone. We are all kids inside. That's where it all started from, was when we were kids.
I actually think that we have an inner teenager in us, Carla, that the reticence that many of us go through, it's an inner teenager that's like, I don't want to change, go away. And that voice that I have, that's the inner teenager, I'm like, yes, I know. And you want to be walking around singing Rainy Days and Mondays, and you want everybody to pay attention to you, but it's not going to happen today, honey. And I say that out loud, and then I can move forward. But yes, I think that what the techniques that Leslie uses with kids actually translate to a lot of us older kids. What do you think, Carla?
I totally agree. And I think part of it is that we have learned that emotions, hide them, just stay involved with movement, going ahead. And because we hide our emotions, we hide our ability to stay within the vortex that allows us to grow. We stop, I'm afraid to go live. and be on camera. And I hear this many, many, many times a day. And I come back in and say, if you are afraid to do something, it's better to face it now and go ahead instead of saying, well, I'll do it tomorrow. When Rehan first did that with me, I got really angry and he said, okay, I'm leaving. And I'm like, no, I'll do it. Because I knew that I had to do it, but that big no was there. Like, why, what in the world am I doing? And as I began to do this more and more and face the fear, I began saying, oh, I can do this. But it's a moment of taking that fear and saying, okay, that moment's gone. I know that I'm angry or I'm frustrated or I'm feeling I can't do it. But unless I do it, I'm going to be left behind. Like that short 1 minute video that I did on conversation yesterday. I thought, oh, I can't do it. And I was frustrated. And I had this agreement with Asma that I would get it done and I'd post one yesterday. After about an hour and a half, it got done. And it not because I was scared anymore, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I couldn't find the recording that we had made about how to do it. So I was playing around with it, but if I had allowed that to stop at that moment, I would have missed that whole opportunity. So I think as adults, we are children. We're still children. We forget. Yeah, we may have to pay that rent bill and we may have to pay the electric bill. But our ability to live is in that childness nature, which is all love and all, oh, I'm going to do something instead of, oh, I can't do it and I'll stay in my comfort zone. And I think we need to move forward and say, okay, I'm going to do more than I think I could do. And I'm going to move it forward.
But I like what Leslie said about doing it a little bit at a time, because then
Right.
if you think of it as just a little bit, then you don't have to be so overwhelmed. And sometimes when you do a little bit, you find, oh, I can do this, and you do more.
Agreed. And that's what I did yesterday. I wanted to know that I could do it. And then all of a sudden, because I wanted to know that I could do it, I ended up doing it. But the little bit that I did, even with Asma teaching me how to do it, was a big deal. And then the little bit that I was doing, how am I ever going to get this published, was another big deal. But I knew I could, I thought I could do it. I'm using my experience, but I think this experience goes with everyone. The child learning to walk learns to walk after many times of just standing up and not knowing that he can stand up for more than 2 seconds.
Yep.
He's doing it. And we say, oh, he can't do it because he's not standing. He can't stand up. Yeah, he is. He already stood up for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he takes his first step, yay! Okay, he fell. When he took the step.
Yeah. One of the things I've shared here before, Carla, is how I've learned a lot about my own self-therapy through watching my son grow up and learning how to be a parent. And I wasn't a perfect parent, but I used to tell him, you're really lucky that I'm your mom because I have the patience to put up with this. My son was very much into climbing everything. I actually told him he was part monkey. And I had luckily read an article that kind of said the difference between a mom and a dad. The kid climbs a tree and the mom says, oh no, he's going to fall, he's going to hurt himself, because moms want to make sure that they're comfortable and they're safe. And the dad gets under the tree and goes, oh, what's a broken bone or two? You know, getting ready to capture him. And I remembered that when my son went up a tree about 2 stories high in a tree during a little league game, and all the mothers were just, your boy, look at your boy. And the voices were really high. And I looked up at him and I said, very calmly, I said, you know, Chris, if you don't settle down here really carefully, we won't be able to get ice cream. And, you know, that kid was down in 90 seconds. And the mothers were angry, telling me that I was rewarding bad behavior. And I was like, well, 1, that wasn't bad behavior. That was a boy being a boy. And 2, did we call the 911 and get the fire truck? No, it worked. So I'm reveling that my son actually heard me and did what I asked. You know, and so I learned something by doing that, by not reacting with my gut in that moment, which was total fear, but allowing my gut to say, yeah, you're totally fearful, but remember that what you heard, you need to be the dad in this moment. And, you know, he settled down and he had his ice cream and he was all the better for it, you know, and I still remember that, because making change takes making those steps, those tiny little steps. You know, one of the things that I know in change management, which is something that I've worked in my corporate life, a vice president asked, you know, we brought you in to help with change management. What are you going to do? And I actually said to him, yeah, I'm not going to do a whole lot. You're going to be surprised. And he looked at me with this, but we're paying you a lot of money. What is it? You know? And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to have meetings, and we're going to bring in 5 people and they're going to agree. And then we're going to bring in another 5 or 10 people and we're going to get them to agree. And by the time that we've met maybe 20 different groups of people, then you're going to see that the change is starting to happen. And about a year after that, we were having lunch and he said, I really didn't believe you, but look at this, you know, look at where we are. We're actually making the plans and people are on board. I'm amazed, you know, and it was because I know if you walk in and say, I'm here and we're going to make a change, everybody comes around and it's like circling the wagons in the Old West. Yep, but right. if you say, hey, we're going to have a meeting, we're going to talk about this, everybody comes and we talk about it and we make decisions. And, you know, the magic sauce that I had was getting people to sign up and commit, you know, so that, and then my job was to actually, well, basically bug them until they did it, you know, and then we'd have the next meeting and then the next meeting. And pretty soon we had 250 people involved in this big project. And, you know, we came up with 15 different plans of what they needed to do. And then we implemented those plans. Mm-hmm. It was huge. It was huge. But I told him, all I'm going to do is schedule meetings. And he didn't believe me. But we have to do that in our own head. We have to schedule the meetings and make the plans and say to the teenager inside, okay, it's okay. We're going to do this. We're going to learn how to use fear to support ourselves. We're going to learn how to use anger to identify when we need to make a change. You know, anger is okay when used appropriately. And that's one of the emotions I was not allowed to have growing up, and I'm still working with it. And as you said, it takes a day or two sometimes to realize you're angry. And once you start to say, oh, it took me 2 days, and then it took me 1 day. Oh my God, I'm in the middle of it and I'm angry right now and I'm going to say something, but I'm going to say something that's going to help move it along versus something that's going to cause a rift. So you say to your best friend, I really appreciate what you're doing, but how you approached this today didn't feel so good. I'm a little bit angry. So I do want to express that, but I want to thank you for allowing me this moment. You know, because you have to learn that. And I think if we go back to the quotes. The one quote was, "You own your feelings, you own your thoughts, you control both. No one has a right to any of it, to any of you without your permission." And that might be what we need to learn before we can balance and accept emotion. Does that sound right?
Well, personally, for me, I feel like there are 4 parts of me, or at least 3 parts of me. The higher mind that kind of sees everything from that larger perspective, then the body, which has got its own agenda based on my childhood experiences and habits, and then the mind, the thinking mind, that also has developed its beliefs and attitudes from early childhood. And I have to work with those parts of myself, because if I don't, I'm going to bump against resistance or reluctance. So I learn to understand their language and understand how to communicate with those parts of myself so that we can work together. Because as higher mind, I can't do anything without this body. I need it on board with me. So I want to listen to it when it's upset, when it gets fearful, and not push it away or bully it into doing something.
I concur with that, Doctor. And, I think it's really important that, we work with all 3, wise mind, the mind, and the body, to begin to coordinate our approach, especially if there's trauma on board, right? Because, we can see that, we need to calm and down-regulate the body. We need to be able to become aware of what our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors and beliefs are. And then we need to also be mindful of the impacts of history and spirituality and whatever those pieces are as well. I also think that, or in my practice, I also notice that kindness to the self is really key. Be patient with yourself, be loving towards yourself. Guilt has its place, but too much guilt and too much shame. If you want to read about shame, you can look into Brene Brown and some of the other authors who are real good at that, and have researched it in depth. But here's the thing: loving you and your emotions and where you're at is really a super sauce to be able to move forward in change. No one, if you look at all of us, whether you're an adult, an adolescent, or a child, screaming at people or at yourself or yelling at yourself inside of yourself doesn't create change. What creates change? Creating change is support, a mentor, kindness. And so my experience is that be kind to yourself and coach yourself to the change, or find somebody like a friend, a pastor, a therapist, a spiritualist, somebody who can support you in the change, and including supporting yourself.
Many people are afraid to accept the fact that they have emotions. And because of that, it causes a lot of confusion, because they don't realize that what's moving them towards life is their emotion. They can either decide, I've been listening to a lot of Abraham Hicks. You can either decide to look at what's negative and fall into that trap, or you can decide, hey, I want to move forward. Let me find my happy place so I can begin to relax and begin to move forward. And I've noticed even with myself, I kind of, I don't have this and I need to have it by a certain time because of X, Y, and Z, and I need the finances, and I look at what is lacking instead of what is happening. Miracles are happening every day, and we miss it. The miracle is left behind because we're looking at what we don't have.
Exactly.
And I made a pledge today that today I am going to look for the miracles. In a way, Leslie, you were a miracle when you showed up today, because I thought, oh, she's not going to show up. She doesn't even pay attention to what's going on. You were, but someone made a mistake and I couldn't get back. I couldn't get to you. So, being stuck in that emotion of anger, which I was for a few moments, didn't allow us to move forward. But finally, I heard what you were saying, and I thought, oh, let's see what happens and get out of this mindset I'm in. And we were able to go forward with the show and have you there, because at that point, when you started, I was like, how in the world did you get here? And she disappeared.
Oh, no.
She'll
That's
come
very funny. How did you do that, Carla?
I did not do it on purpose. I hope she comes back.
So, Carla, I just wanted to respond to what you said. It takes practice. There's also a biological reason for our negative mindset that, when it comes to the lower brainstem and that instinctive part of our brain, that was what kept us alive, was noticing the things that were dangerous or were not safe. And that if we made a mistake, at least we were alive. But if we made a mistake and we were wrong, we could die. So there's Dr. Rick Hansen used to talk about how we are actually programmed negatively. Now, the good news is that we can actually change that programming, but it takes practice. And so it's great whenever you see that and you see yourself in that negative place and you can switch out of it. That's fabulous. That's developing those new neural networks in your brain.
So, Michelle, is that a practice you have to do for a short time, or is it a continual practice, or do you need to recognize the incremental steps that you're making? And
you mean, how do you change your mindset from being in a negative place to a positive? Yes, it's incremental and it's practice. And it's just like practice with a muscle, at the beginning it hurts and it takes effort and you have to focus on it, and eventually it gets easier. And how long is it going to take? It depends on the person. It depends on their trauma and their history, how easy it is for them.
Yeah, the reason I ask it like that is sometimes we say something, like it takes practice, but we don't always quantify it. So people walk away with, oh, so if I practice this for a week, I should change. And that's not really true. And as Carla,
let me put that in a perspective. I used to be a long distance runner. And in order to be a long distance runner, you have to run every day. You miss a day and you feel it immediately. Well, that's what I mean by practice. It is a practice, like you have to do it all the time. If you're a musician, you have to practice all the time or you lose that physical, muscular ability. So the same thing is true of the mind. The neural nets in your mind, the ones that you redo over and over again, they're the ones that stick. If you don't do it, they lose their connections. So practice means not, oh, I'll practice it for a week. It means it's a lifetime practice. You have to do that.
I want to say, speaking of miracles, Leslie's back.
Yay!
Yeah, sorry about that.
I think
it disappeared me.
Leslie, you disappeared at a very auspicious time.
I know, honey.
Our
power went out. Our power went out.
Oh,
wow.
So anyway, I'm back. But thank you for what you were saying, Carla. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and I don't think I'm here still yet.
You are. It's just it'll come. It'll come. One of the things we've learned to practice is how to manage and balance technology. you know.
But you know what, Leslie? What happened? Everything
Yeah.
happens for a reason. It wasn't a coincidence, although you and I may think it is. But it does happen for a reason. It helps us and makes us grow forward. And I know this is said in many places, but Allison, who I miss very dearly on the show, would always say, what happens for us and not to us.
Yes.
And when we begin to look at everything as an opportunity, we begin to understand that it doesn't matter what has happened as long as we see the opportunity in it and move forward with it. And I think we all need to look at it like the long distance runner. The first time you ran may have been just up the block and you couldn't get any further, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's a part of that whole process of getting ready to do it.
Yes. And I think that, you know, each piece that you build in your psyche and in your practice, the small increments will build and build, and it becomes a practice that you can build upon, which is great. Little by little, build your practice. You know, just like you said, Carla, about children who walk. They don't think every day that they're practicing, but they are. Every crawling, every little step. So I think as adults, we have higher expectations of practice.
And I also think not only higher expectations of practice, we think that, oh, I'm an adult, I should be able to do this now, but I'm afraid, so I'm not going to do it. And that is, I mean, the people who come to the English show, I cannot speak English. I want to speak English. And I know I make fun of this quite a bit, but I'm not making fun of it because it's a funny thing. I make fun of it because people don't realize they're already doing what they want to do. They just need the practice in order to
Correct.
get at it. And anyway, we are closing the show in 3 minutes, but it'll go a little over. And I'd like to hear everyone's small little take of what they gained from today. And we're going to start with Dr. Leslie, because she's been taking the brunt from me today. And I'm a little afraid of it, but go ahead, Dr. Leslie. And don't tell me you're frozen.
Okay.
We may need to come back to you.
Not at all.
Are you here or not?
So, yeah, I think that emotions are critically important, and that we want to be emotion accepting. Okay. I am. Can you not hear me?
Leslie,
It's
we'll come back to you and see if we can hear you. We're gone again. Okay, Dr. Michelle.
One of the things I'm taking away from our conversation today is what Leslie said about incremental. When you work with children, how you really have to go slowly. And when you realize that a lot of the issues that we have in our day-to-day life stem from when we were children, we can take that as a real good coaching. Be patient with yourself. Give yourself time. Don't expect perfection going out the door. It takes time to develop these new habits. and these new awarenesses about ourselves. And I love some of the ideas that Leslie shared about the using the physical, or using drawing, or realizing that not everybody has immediate access to their emotions. And sometimes if you do have access to your emotions, it's hard to realize that there are people who don't, that they really are shut down. So I loved that. Thank you, Leslie. You gave me some new ideas that I will incorporate in my work.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. And, the one thing I was trying to say, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Is I really encourage emotion accepting in your life, and working toward working with whatever trauma you have or whatever upbringing you have to develop emotion accepting in your life, even if it's little itty bitty steps at a time. That's my takeaway.
And you know what, when you're saying about emotional acceptance, many people don't realize that when you say, oh, I can't get on Zoom, that's an emotional reaction. And it's okay that you're there, but accept it. And the moment you accept it, it begins to move forward. With that, yeah. Jeanne?
I like the idea that we can balance emotions with our logic, that they, both sides of us are just as important, that we can be, human 360 and look to the emotions, no matter how we characterize them, as an integral part of who we are. So figuring out where you might be stuck is that incremental work that both Michelle and Leslie are talking about. But simply saying, yes, I'm feeling this way is a huge step forward. And recognizing,
if you can't say it, draw a little smiley face.
Yeah. And working at how to go forward by working in those emotions into who you are, to allow that. Because I'm not a walking automaton, I'm a ball of emotion, and that's okay. And that, I think, when we can get to a point where we can say to somebody, give me a second, I'm kind of worked up, I need to work this out, and that's a great practice, and everybody understands it, then it's a step forward. Or saying, I am so elated today, this just happened and I need to celebrate, is just as important.
Yes.
We need to look at the good stuff, we need to look at the stuff that's a little bit troublesome, and that's who we are. And that's where we get into allowing ourselves to do, as Marianne Williamson said, allowing our light to shine and taking the bushel basket off of it.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that helps real quick is to realize, especially in my couples, that just because we express an emotion doesn't mean anyone else has to do anything with it. That so in my couples, a lot of times when you express something, the other partner feels they have to fix it, take care of it, do it. So an exercise I use is that I have them each hold a pillow, and when the other person shares an emotion, we just let it sit on the other person's pillow. You just have to witness it and reflect it, but you don't have to fix other people's emotions. So when we think of that you can just share it and hold it for the other person. You don't have to fix it, do it, dress it up. That can be a good holder for people, so that when someone else expresses emotion, just be with it, reflect it back. You don't have to fix it. And that can lead to a more emotion accepting society. And so that's something I wanted to leave you with.
That's beautiful.
Another thing about that is many people run away because someone is expressing an emotion.
Correct.
They get scared, and it's not because they don't like you or they don't care about you. It's because they don't know how to handle it.
Exactly.
And not being able to handle it makes things become a little more difficult.
Or they need to just get out of the situation if they can't handle it. I think that's
Right.
an
Exactly.
action. It's a good action to take too, if you can't
It
handle
can
it.
be. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a friend who does do that, and it drives me up a wall. But at the same time, I understand there's too much emotion.
Mhm.
This person will take care of it in that person's own way. And I need to just step away too in order to move forward. And having said that, believe it or not, ladies, we are over an hour and the Learning a Show is coming on soon. I want to thank you. We had a very insightful conversation here. And I wanted to have a girl power day as well as a male power. We'll have Neville Gone and Camera and Rizvi on Thursday. And I'm very excited about it because we'll also, although I'm not a guy, but we will get the guys' thoughts on emotions. And it's usually the guys who were often, I've noticed, the guys who run away from this and why, and understand why. And with that, can we all wave goodbye? Yes, Jeanne, you want to say something?
Just, I wanted to remind the folks that are watching that this is on a YouTube channel, Giggle Fest University, and ask that if you like it, to comment, to give it a thumbs up, and to subscribe.
Thank you. I keep on forgetting to do that, and I need you there to remind me. And now we will wave goodbye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.